Response to recent incidents such as cable disruptions in the Baltic Sea and drone intrusions. What about those? Vulnerabilities across domains, including physical, digital, and aerial infrastructure. Then response strategies, what we have there. Then addressing emerging electronic threats. There's so many issues to discuss. So please welcome CEO of Comsisive, William Webb, as our moderator. Welcome. And let's see who are the panelists.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everyone here. So it feels very timely to be having this discussion. We're in a world now, of course, where we are extremely reliant on networks, and we only have to look at examples like the power outages that occurred in Spain and Portugal that took down networks to see just how society almost falls apart within a few hours when we don't have our networks available to us, or we don't have the ability to do the kind of things that we're used to doing electronically. And of course, timely as well with the AWS outage. I know that's been discussed already, and probably not a result of a specific threat as such, but nevertheless an example of what happens to us and our way of working and our way of living when networks go down. And clearly we're in a world now where there's a much larger likelihood, unfortunately, of rogue actors, whether they be states or individuals, deliberately targeting networks as a way of essentially some kind of warfare or disruption that they want to take forwards. So that's what we're going to look at in the panel, and very interested to hear the views of a wide range of different individuals that we've got here. Also very interested to hear questions from the audience, so please do save those up. We have plenty of time for those, and we'll dive straight in. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and then to speak just a little about their specific area of expertise, what their company's been up to, and what they've been looking at over the last year or so. So we'll take it from left to right. We'll start with Anna.
Okay. It's a pleasure to be back here. Hello, everybody. My name is Anne Stephan. I work for Rohde & Schwarz. And let me introduce a little bit the company Rohde & Schwarz. We are a global technology leading company with a headquarter in Munich. So I'm also based in Munich, being at the Techratory, I think, for the 6th or 7th time. With the company in Munich, we are active in various different industries. So we have a strong legacy in developing cutting-edge solutions for secure communications, for test and measurement. Maybe some of you have heard us from these two areas already, and of course also for spectrum monitoring. What brings us to this panel is our critical infrastructure is one of our key missions. We protect, but also we enable different areas in the critical infrastructure that can go from aerospace, over defense, over telecommunication, and also public safety is one of these areas. From the technology point of view, the solutions we use for this, and just to name a few examples, could be ensuring reliable communication and the connectivity, is also ensuring a trusted data transfer. And of course, is also, we spoke about the counter drones, is also having solutions available for counter drones and having solutions to really establish a robust environment and a performance setup for critical infrastructures to operate in.
Thank you. Evius.
Yeah. Hello. It's my pleasure to be here at the most critical panel of the Techratory. We are not first time here, so few years, but I'm really pleased to say that Latvia State Radio Television Center, which I'm representing, is celebrating 101st anniversary this year, so almost as old as Latvia itself. Our name suggests our heritage, radio and television, but that's still what we are doing, but we are doing much more. So basically nowadays providing many critical systems, critical networks, critical data centers, everything critical, which is not very visible, but I would say one most visible asset which everybody sees and likes, it's Riga TV Tower. We are really proud that it is still the highest, the tallest building in EU. That's really nice. Another hidden assets what we have, most likely the most hidden asset is the undersea cable, several hundred meters under the sea level. That is also part of our critical, but all in all, we are making sure that these critical networks, critical backbones always work. In a best case, nobody feels, but if something breaks, then it's quite visible in the news, but that's our daily job to make sure that everything works. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Paul.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Adams. I'm from Nokia, and for this bit, I just need to stand up so I can see everybody. Who thinks Nokia makes mobile phones? Be honest. How many? Okay, so I'm wearing two hats today. I'm wearing a marketing hat, but I'm also wearing a government relations hat. And as a marketing person, it's my primary goal to make sure that nobody in the world thinks that Nokia makes mobile phones anymore. Because we haven't done that since 2012 when we sold it to Microsoft. And it worked out very well for us. I think with my government relations hat on, I have a very interesting perspective because in the UK, so that's government relations for the UK and Ireland I'm talking about, whereas my marketing job is for Europe, hence why I'm sitting here in front of you lovely people. And that is, we need to have a very clear definition of what critical infrastructure is. Okay? Nokia, we basically underpin digital economies across Europe. So we know a lot about security, and we know a lot about how attacks work. And in the UK just now, the government has reclassified data centers as critical national infrastructure. So that definition is pretty broad. So we could talk about how we secure data centers. We could talk about how we secure the connections between data centers. There was a discussion downstairs just before this about quantum security. And quantum is very key in how we secure the information between data centers. We could talk about cable infrastructure and how we secure cables. Again, that's another thing where we can talk about quantum, because there are technologies now which can identify by their signature a type of submarine in the sea. These are technologies that Nokia is at the forefront of. We could talk about how we prevent DDoS attacks in a critical infrastructure, and that could be, I mean, in the UK again, there have been attacks at the airports. Well, that was a European attack, actually, wasn't it? There's attacks at the airports. We've had attacks on Jaguar Land Rover, which has basically put them out of business, so they had to get a loan from the government. So I think we need a very clear definition of what critical infrastructure is, and I think this is a great place to define it. And how technology and the tech that we provide and the lovely people provide, how that technology can help. What we can do to answer the question of how we secure these infrastructures. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Matthias.
Good afternoon. Matthias Männi from NATO CCD COE, and since the name is so complex, I think it's fair to start from clarifying what the CCD COE stands for. It's a cooperative cyber defense center of excellence for NATO, and maybe it's also fair to say straight away that we are not part, as an organization, we are not part of the NATO chain of command. We are a center of excellence that is accredited by NATO. So we are free to do what we do, define our track, and we function based on the allies and like-minded nations by sending their resources in, and with whom we collaborate and produce our results. What we focus on is research and trainings across technological domains, legal domain, and what my personal focus daily is research into 5G standalone networks, interconnectivity, interoperability. Personally, I have background in the telco industry throughout my life, so 2G, 3G, 4G, and their development has been my path. But then maybe in the context of the topic, let me explain you a bit what do we do in the center more broadly. And in regards to the exercises, what is, maybe somebody has heard, Locked Shields exercise, which is a defensive exercise. then we protect actual infrastructure there. Everything is not virtually existing, but practically existing, and the components which are usually there is telecom infra, electricity infra systems. Then there has been water systems involved. There has been transportation systems like airports, railway systems, actually part of the exercise. And then the red teamers, blue teamers, and the green teamers putting everything together have really a practical hands-on experience on top of the actual platforms that are daily use in the environment where we live. So another aspect how we function at the exercises, which has grown relatively large event to these days, is that all the teams that participate there, they are international. And there is a prerequisite that if you show up there as a competitor, then you have an international presence. And by that, we are also propagating collaboration across allies, across nations, and sharing know-how and competence broader, because in the end, the systems we operate in these domains are pretty much the same, be it Latvia or UK. The vendors are more or less known, and the protocols are standardized. So in this regard, it's, I think, very good that we stimulate this international collaboration vibes year by year, because in the case of event, these will be this handful of guys who will need to react then. But then, when mentioning that, I wanted to say as an intro as well that let's not forget that we are not waiting for any event here. The vulnerabilities of our critical infrastructure are being attacked right now. Every day, every moment, all over. Be it physical domain, be it virtual domain, be it humanly manipulation or errors, whatever. So we are always under attack. And from this regard, I guess, if I should say two things that are like mandatory to keep tact and keep some momentum of being able to fight against all this scene, is to continue heavy with the like-minded nations on the research, because when we research, then we do find out better ways. Usually it is so that the next technological solution that is replacing the old one is also cybersecurity-wise more secure, maybe also more functional, but that's another side. And then we train and we collaborate. Because only then, because all the technological scene and the infrastructure around is in continuous development, then us as a consumers of it always need to develop in the same tact, then we are able to keep pace. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marco.
Thank you for the floor. Hello to everyone. Greetings also from my side. So my name is Marko Mišmaš, and for the past 2 years, I have been leading the Agency for Communication Networks and Services of the Republic of Slovenia, ACOS. ACOS is the national regulatory authority for the spectrum management, for the regulation of electronic communication sector, for audiovisual media regulation, for postal sector, for railways, for digital services, and from next year on also for the AI. In 2026, ACOS is also chair of BEREC, the body of European regulators for electronic communications, which is the European Association of Electronic Communication Regulators, and serves as an advisory body to the European Council, to the Parliament, and to the Commission in the field of telecom regulation. I would like today to share, let's say, one project we started in the area of resilience in Slovenia, and also the reasons why we did several months ago. We had in Slovenia in last, let's say, 11 years, 2 natural disasters. The first one was ice rain and also sleet in 2014, and severe floods 2 years ago. In both cases, were serious damages on the power distribution and mobile backhauling infrastructure. All this result resulted that the mobile networks fell down in some areas and also went down for not only for an hour, but on the level of several days, even the weeks. And this year, we put, the second case is that this year we put on these mobile networks also the public warning system, which I think is the correct and right decision, but inside the agencies we had let's say a lot of question marks on the table. And that's why we said we need to put ourselves into the active position and start really the project. With that project, we would like to increase the level of resilience of the telecommunication network. So we had on the table, let's say, 3 starting points. We would like to achieve the highest population signal coverage possible with as less base station as possible. We need to set up sufficient and resilient sufficient resilience to power outages, and secure resilience on the mobile backhauling. At the second stage, we can put into the project also the satellite connections. The best coverage in Slovenia can only be achieved with the high altitude locations because we are a very rural country. Typically, is this between 600 and 1,000 meters above the sea level. And based on the spatial analysis we did and the simulations, we decided that the most appropriate are the sites of our national TV and radio broadcaster where majority of mobile providers are also present. With reliable high-capacity batteries backup, additionally powered by the solar energy, the project is recognized as a sustainable, which is very important, and a future-proof. From service point of view, we will need to support continuous operation for at least emergency calls, 112, public warning system, TETRA services, and as a second channel of, let's say, public warning system, the digital audio broadcasting. And if needed, another critical communications. Here, agency has taken a lead to prepare technical solutions together with all stakeholders, ministries, operators, and national broadcasting provider. However, it concerned the national resilience framework. For these reasons, at the end of the technical part, the project will be implemented by the Ministry of Defense, which is the competent authority for critical infrastructure. We are promoting the project because we believe that it represents a good and replicable example of good practice, and that it could inspire or even show the way to other European countries in their efforts to strengthen the resilience of the critical communications.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone. So as you can hear, we've got a great mix of companies providing technologies, of regulators, of defense organizations. And we've heard, and I don't think anyone doubts, how the threats are growing to infrastructure, both from bad actors and, as Marco said, from things like climate change resulting in floods or other types of outages. And we're also seeing and learning, of course, how we're becoming ever more reliant on all of these kind of systems. I was slightly amused to see that one of the key features of the AWS outage that was highlighted by the news feeds was that the Ring doorbells no longer worked during that time. Hopefully nobody died as a result, but I'm sure a lot of deliveries got missed because of that going down. But it highlights the fact that so many aspects of our society are now intertwined in amongst all these networks. So given all of that, are we on the right trajectory to make sure that these networks keep functioning, or do we need more intervention? Do we think technology itself will effectively provide solutions, or do we think that we need to see more of the kind of things that Marco talked about, governments actually stepping in, mandating particular actions, whether it be hardening certain kinds of networks, or indeed defense organizations actually taking an ever bigger role in patrolling and protecting the infrastructures that we have. So, open to the panel. Is it going to be more technology, more regulation? I'm sure you're going to say a bit of both, but which one would you bias towards in those two? Anyone want to go first? Anna?
I can go first because I think it's a combination of everything. You also brought in the defense communication, and I think in that case, it's the impact is really severe, so then you have to be quick. And then probably there's not such a big priority on the regulation, it's more on the function of a network. So to guarantee the function, the reliability of a network, you can do that with a continuous monitoring system. You can test the network, you can do coverage measurements, so there are solutions for that there. And if you look more for the public networks, you also have a combination of these because you have to ensure that the network is functioning. So you have to ensure by test and measurement, for example, you have a network in place. But on the other hand, you need a regulation as well. But you also need to have a plan B and a plan C, because in the example from Marco, when he said there was a flooding, the infrastructure was down, then of course you have tested that infrastructure before, but if the base stations are destroyed, there is simply no way to deploy a network. So plan B could be either you bring up a base station with a drone in the air, have a temporary network in place. You can have other solutions. You can have shelters where you put base stations in to guarantee the network. So for that resilience, in my opinion, is another key aspect to ensure that you have coverage systems. If you look at other parts of critical infrastructure, for example, air traffic control, it's mandatory. You have a main system, you have a backup system there for the communication because it's really crucial in that.
So secondary systems that effectively can be turned on or
absolutely, and take over immediately the complete function from the main system.
I can maybe mention the local context. We can apply it for small countries, or for example Latvia, or also we can extend it to Baltic countries. Sometimes we call it Baltic Island, because the fact is the Baltics is connected to main Europe with limited piece of land, some 70 kilometers, famous Suwalki corridor. Everything else is a sea and non-friendly neighbors. But what we are, our statement is that we should look at high availability within a country or within a limited geography. And high availability means also networks, also data centers, critical systems, etc. And then we go down to technology layer by layer. There shouldn't be like any single point of failure in the best case. Should be backup, and the backup resilience, redundancy, the more is better. Of course, there is economic factor, of course, but there should be redundancy.
So you're effectively saying more infrastructure in country so that you're not so reliant on.
But it should be really depends on the technical layer. Just one example, the fiber optics cable. The big cable has 300 strands or fibers, and you shouldn't have a redundancy within one cable, because it's one physical thing. It should be at two distant locations, and same for data centers. But the other part is, if you're talking about Baltic Island, another part is outside connections, outside of Latvia, outside of countries. This is a different thing. There is limited number of connections, connectivity. I mentioned undersea cable. There are few, but not hundreds. And that's another thing. But first is high availability within geography, another is outside.
Makes sense. Cool.
I think, building on what you just said, actually, you touched on a really interesting point, which is about economics. Because economics is in everything at the end of the day. And I think it depends on what part of critical national infrastructure or infrastructure we're talking about. Protecting a cable, as you said, separating them under long distances is certainly a way to do that. So, basically, physical diversity, in other words, is certainly one way to protect that part of the infrastructure. But if we think about cyber attacks, so some kid in his bedroom wanting to take down Marks and Spencers or whatever just because he can, right? There was a study. So there's part of it's economic and part of it's educational, right? I think on the cyber side. So there was a study done. I think it was by the BBC. But don't quote me on that. Where they discovered if somebody was walking along the street and they see a USB key on the floor and it's got a company's logo on it, around half of those people will pick that up and put it in the machine. about half.
Okay.
If they see the same USB key and it's got a company logo on it and it says salary information, virtually everyone will put it into their machine because humans are intrinsically nosy. We just want to know the secrets, right? So there's an educational side. So that's how the Iranian nuclear plant was attacked by Israel all those years ago with Stuxnet. That was a USB key inserted into a machine that was behind a firewall, right? And there's nothing you can do about that. That's an education thing, right? Then the other side of it is economics. So there's a very famous hacker called Kevin Poulsen, and there's a law. It's called Poulsen's law, and it's basically that. And the law is basically, if your data isn't worth anything or it's worth less than what it would cost to get it, it's safe. And that's economics.
Yeah.
If you've got a car and it's in a garage and it's worth 100 euros, but it will take somebody 500 euros to steal it, they're not going to do it because it's not economically viable. And it's the same with cybersecurity. If the costs of getting in time or money or effort or whatever are so great, then because it's all an arms race. In a standard deviation curve of a war, of a conflict, it gets to a point where it's the height of the conflict, and then there's a resolution, and then it goes back to peace again. The problem with cybersecurity is that deviation curve is constantly moving to the right, or left in your case, but that way, so that it never gets resolved. It never gets, it's always escalating. So we just have to make sure that it's so expensive or so difficult, then that really helps.
And is that a government task, or is that or is the government to educate the companies to do that?
I think the government has a role to educate,
yeah.
and there's a whole bunch of studies out there about how companies are so poor at their cybersecurity. We have an agency in the UK called the National Cybersecurity Centre, which is part of GCHQ, Government Communications Headquarters, which is the bit of the government that gives intel to MI5 and MI6. If James Bond existed, he'd be in MI6. So it's quite, these are serious security people. And the public face of that gives advice to businesses on how to secure their networks. And I think that's hugely valuable. And I think they could go further. But I think it's a personal responsibility as well, of course, right?
Coming back to the original question, I think the question itself is perhaps a bit limiting because it kind of puts your thoughts into a national framework. Defense usually a national institution versus commercial domain at the same territory. But if we think about what is the world where we live in a world where basically the threat is on the east, and it's a big threat, and then we are fractioned here. We have countries next to other countries, and then all the countries have their own systems in place, organizations for defense, organizations for this and that. I think, and then when we put the third pillar here is the infrastructure. Okay, be it physical infrastructure, more I think we are maybe having in mind here everything that is on top of that, something that is powered on and then feeding our needs. If you think of this infrastructure, as I mentioned, it's usually common standard, common protocols, common type of stuff there. If something is vulnerable and gets attacked in one country, can easily be done at the same time at the other country because they are all running the same software version and they are equally vulnerable. So I can't overemphasize the need to really think international, inter-organizational when we are thinking of protecting our infrastructure. So that's why I'm coming back to emphasizing those practical exercises that we do in a routine manner together, knowing our fellows across the border, and each of them bringing their experiences and competencies, what they have, how they have dealt with it. And that makes us as a society next to the eastern border much stronger if we just take it individually inter-country in each country. And so that is what is ringing in my head.
Yeah. And do you see that happening, or do you see individual countries trying to do their own things?
I think the more north you go, the more into your own shoes you look, the close the human nature and culture and behavior is. The more south you go, the more open you are. But I think it's just a question of being honest to ourselves, recognizing who we are as species, and really switch everybody has the switch, it's just in a different place, to switch this collaboration and, careful mode on, and take the curiosity to look how your neighbor is doing as well, your like-minded neighbor, and I think it just takes to activate yourself, and then everything happens. It's just that we don't activate so often, or there's no good cause.
Yeah.
The cause comes, then everybody's activating, then it can be too late already.
Yeah. And Marco, you talked about your national network. How did that come about? Was that a government initiative to bring that about?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to add on that topic you put on the table, on the USB stick and how the people, nature, is perceiving that. So I have one story from our penetration tests, where also one of the tests was unknown USB stick on the floor. And we got the response. So somebody put it into the computer, but from different domain. What does this mean? That because somebody put it at home into the computer, not at the agency, because at the agency is forbidden. So this is the way how human perspective in nature is working. A lot of curiosity. So back on the question, yes, I think from one point of view, the technology is solving where there is a business case, let's say resilience cases. But when we are talking about the natural disasters, these are higher levels. Right. When we are talking about for instance, really natural disasters and the cases I wouldn't like to mention. Even let's say, disaster on the higher level, here I think the governments needs to get involved because due to the financial challenges. As I mentioned in my keynote today, there is a market failure, as we call it in BEREC, internally in BEREC for resilience. What does this mean? That for this highest level of resilience, there is no business case. And here the governments needs to be involved, really. This financing gap needs to be addressed more clearly. On the other hand, if we want to increase the resilience, I think for redundancy and reliability of the network, some sort of regulatory push also is needed. Because if with top-down approach, this top-down approach can be very helpful. If we want to change, that the changes happened faster and more harmonized all over the Europe.
Thank you. So broadly, I'm hearing that governments do need to intervene to set harder goals, but also to fund those goals, because these are mostly commercial companies and they won't, out of the kindness of their own hearts, just put more money into their networks unless they see some sort of commercial incentive. That will happen on a national level, but ideally needs to be coordinated more broadly so that we can make use of insight across multiple countries, that we can essentially share insight information, and we can make use of sort of common defense forces effectively to address that. We've talked a lot about kind of bad actor threats. My observation of the last few years has actually been the vast majority of times that networks have gone down, it's just been human error. And that seems to be the case with the AWS service. It's often just a bad bit of software programming by somebody that doesn't get caught. Do we think that's going to change? Do we think we're moving into a world where actually it's going to be predominantly malicious acts that start to bring networks down more so than it is just human failure, or is it just impossible to tell at this stage?
I think that's inevitable, what you just said, because what we're discovering, so Nokia has pivoted very directly into the data center space over the last couple of years, well, more than a couple of years, a few years. And what and we're not alone in this clearly, have discovered is that automation, red AI, is absolutely critical in data centers. If you've got the bigger the data center, the more important it becomes, basically, I would say. Because you need to automate to get the workloads into the right place at the right time and all that kind of stuff. And that drives what we're calling human error to zero. So I think it's inevitable, actually, that attacks will become more malicious actors, because I think like the AWS example that you just gave, I think they'll become rarer, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So technology will help solve human error.
100%.
But
Exactly.
yeah.
And also to add on that what you said, the one thing is to bring the network completely down, but there are also other ways how you can interfere in a network, how you can easily interfere the communication, how you can interfere positioning data. So in that case, the network is still operable, but the communication is interfered. And it's crucial, and that's already today happening, to detect where the interference is coming from, and also to detect that there is interference. And then, of course, if you take the example of GPS positioning, it's crucial for a plane to get a GPS positioning. Otherwise, it's rather impossible to operate the plane. So in case that signal is disturbed or is interfered, and we have seen a lot of examples out of the media on that, you need to detect it on the one hand, but also you need to have a plan B to have the resilience in place to say, if I cannot get it via GNSS, maybe I can get it via a 5G broadcast technology, maybe I can get it somewhere else. And that's the GPS signal, that's the communication that is interfered. It can also be, when we talk about the economy, for a banking transmission, for the stock market, the timing is really crucial. So if you interfere the clock timing, that's also a data that is transported, and that clock is just 1 or 2 seconds late, that has a big impact on the stock market. So there is not just the whole network is down scenario, either the network is up. There are many steps in between that we also need to prepare for.
Yeah. And to some degree, we saw that with the AWS outage. It wasn't a failure of everything, it was a failure of certain specific services and websites.
The correct time is a very hot topic, also in 5G. In normal peace times, relying mostly on GPS synchronization. If the GPS has been jammed or scammed, then all the synchronization goes bad. And there are solutions. They are mostly ground-based, using the atomic clocks, and we are currently looking at such a service to deploy it in Latvia. There was mentioned that AI automation would help to reduce human error, but I believe that it will reduce human error, but it can introduce new errors.
Yes.
From the AI side, that we don't know. We need to be careful. What I would mention also for the latency, sometimes it's not a question about seconds, but milliseconds. And our example was also mentioned twice undersea cable. So we had an incident this year in January, and the latency increased 10 times. Yes. Very good.
There's resilience for you.
Very good. It works. Sorry. So we had the latency example in January when
No. Okay. Jammed.
That's my bad. Sorry. So the latency from Latvia to Sweden increased 10 times, and the latency was 10 times slower to Sweden for 1 month. So we haven't had like any big complaints that somebody lost something, but we had the internal brainstorm what could be the examples. So we figured out 2. One was exactly stock exchange. Somebody lost a fortune. Sorry, bad things happen. Another could be somebody lost a Counter-Strike game because of the latency. It's another application. But that's normal. But the most important, there was in place, of course, thanks to internet design, the automatic resilience of the internet itself, so the public didn't feel it. The other part, of course, the enterprise point-to-point connections.
Yep.
And all the enterprises, including ourselves, including our enterprise customers, had the backup line somewhere. Of course, latency is different, but the connection is alive, so that's important.
Are there any questions from the audience at this point? Excellent. let's take one or two of those, and then I have one last question for the panel.
So, questions are on hardware, mission-critical communication networks. Should they be developed or deployed and managed by public institutions or government or private entities with public funds? So, networks.
Yes, should we nationalize them and then...
I've been thinking of it. My personal opinion is that there's no right answer. There is an answer that I think we are pretty different from country to country. There is probably an appropriate match for each. Sometimes it's a bit to the left, sometimes a bit to the right, depending on the society there, what's the history and historical, like how they are used to function, the society in this area. So I think that will define quite much.
Yeah. And in the UK, as an example, we have a sort of halfway house called the Emergency Service Network, which is actually a public network, the EE mobile network, but which the emergency services have essentially paid extra money to have that hardened, the coverage improved, and things like that. So whilst it's still a private network, it has a certain amount of government investment to achieve particular levels of resilience and affordability.
This is always a mix.
Yeah.
Also, like an example in Latvia, that like in every country there are less inhabited regions, we call it white spots. Without the state involvement, investment in connectivity, it's very difficult to make a business case in such places. But another is mentioned again, this call it Latvian offset connections. At the moment in peacetime, there are several connections, and in terms of capacity of throughput, it's enough. But if a number of those break down, with some intention, from the neighbors, then it's a question of maybe new cable, and that's a big money, big investment. Of course, we can attract some funds from somewhere, but from the commercial side, probably not.
Okay.
What about interconnectivity of grids and networks? What is safer for situation when we are in crisis? So some time ago, Latvian Energo started to talk about microgrids, which are local, so they can survive even if the big grid or the connections are cut. So what is the way to go? Microgrids networks or the total interconnected network?
Any thoughts on that? I guess to some degree we have private networks in companies and things that kind of probably would still hopefully stay alive, but not
that kind of exists today. I think. I mean,
it's a combination.
Okay.
We can talk in microgrids somewhere local in a building or in a campus, highly available. In the best case, it's interconnected. If the interconnection breaks down, it should be highly available. If it breaks down, it should be disaster recovery somewhere else.
All right. Yeah. How does the supply chain impacts the infrastructure resilience and security, like manufacturing and support from outside Europe, like trusted hardware producers and stuff? As we know, it's quite a question lately.
Well, I can only speak for Nokia, but we have a distributed supply chain, very, very distributed supply chain. And we actually manufacture our own silicon in many cases in North America. I think that's a challenge, right? And it's actually something the governments are certainly the British government's very focused on, is making sure the supply chains of the vendors that exist in all of the networks, not just telecoms, have a supply chain which is secure and not dependent. But we've had a lot of conversation about an over-reliance on the US, for example, and that is, when you've got a company like NVIDIA that's got a 98% market share, it doesn't matter how diverse your supply chain is, you're going to have the American tech in there somewhere. So
isn't that a new opportunity for European producers?
100%.
Because that's what we're talking about now.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. But
what is happening at this point?
What is happening, I think there are a lot of startups and a lot of smaller companies that are trying to get into this space. But when you've got a company with that level of market share, it's difficult to challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, having said that, in marketing terms, it's quite easy to go from 1% market share to 10% market share. It's pretty easy. but to go from 50% market share to 51 is hellishly difficult. But it would be great to see some more. Clearly, it'd be better to see some more, some sovereign European vendors.
Right, I'm going to leap in here with one last question for everyone. So very quickly, because we only have 3 minutes left between us, what is it you fear most in the future in terms of something that might cause widespread network disruption? And you can be as narrow as broad as you like. So.
Yeah, thinking wild for a moment, I think since all the technological scene is continuously everlasting developing, then I'm afraid that we haven't seen or we can't even think of this next big bang that will hit us, because all of the technological evolution and then AI, okay, maybe a couple of years we have some time yet to get used to it and adapt to it, but it will trigger some extra momentum to either achieve something great, but at the same time goes with the risk that something fails greatly.
So your fear is just something completely unknown that can't be predicted at this point?
Yes, and that feels so obvious. And the only way for us to cope with that is to stay on our toes all the time, keep up to date, update our processes, systems, everything, just to keep up with the pace of development.
Anna?
So our mission is not to let the fear happen at all.
Okay.
So because we really work on foreseeing and predicting what could have happened. And of course, we would be afraid of what could have happened, but we need to stay ahead in order to have a solution to counter what could happen, either in the counter drones, either in the interference. We have heard a lot of examples. So our mission is really to stay ahead, think about what can happen, and try not to let the fear happen.
The only thing to fear is fear itself, or something along those lines. Yes.
I really want to answer two answers.
Yes.
The one is a fear. This is the really bad situation. If you, in a way of incident of crisis, you really don't understand what's happening. But this is the normal business,
Yeah.
Usually we figure out what's happening sooner or later, better sooner. But on a positive side, about future developments, I would really like to mention the really big European ambition. It's called quantum internet. Quantum was mentioned here. So the quantum internet is the next internet thing. We don't know yet what does it mean, but Europe has the basic fundamental knowledge of quantum. Really, it's European thing, and Europe's ambition is not to repeat the first internet development which happened in the US ARPANET and US universities. So now the European ambition, there is a roadmap, and it has to be up and running, if we believe it, in 2035, 2040.
Okay.
So 15 years, next 15 years would be really interesting.
And very quickly, Paul and Marco?
I think we don't know what we don't know.
Don't know.
To be honest with you, and my worry is some terrible zero-day exploit that we just didn't see coming. Really.
Yeah. Marco, last word.
I think the most vulnerable part of this high-tech environment are we, the end users, because we need to understand our role in keeping communication secure. The case with the stick showed everything. And rising awareness and the digital literacy is another field when BEREC and its members, national regulators, can play a significant role in the future.
Great, thank you. And that brings us to time. Thank you for your attention, and make sure you have a backup for your doorbell.
Thank you. And thank you also to our moderator, William Webb.